Hey guys, today we're going to talk about secrets of reading comprehension, secrets of the great readers, the elite readers who score really high in the reading, almost perfect score if not perfect. Now there's two things, there's analytical reading and then there is recreational reading. And sorry to disappoint, if you're looking for some quick fix, if there is a quick fix for being a better reader, there is not. There is no shortcut to being a better reader. It is a long, hard road, and it takes a lifetime to master. But it's not all bad news, you know. Start at any time. Just start reading now. Just take out a book and start reading. Now, there's two kinds of reading: analytical reading and recreational reading. The reading comprehension part is more analytical than it is a recreational, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy what you're about to read. A lot of tutors will tell you to enjoy what you're trying to read, to try to be interested in it. But today I'm going to give you some tips that they work 100% of the times, and it is a proven technique. It's been used by a lot of top scorers, a lot of good test takers. There's a proven techniques. And I'm going to go into a little bit of that in a bit, but as I said, there is no shortcut. All these techniques will only work if you are a good reader to begin with. So start by reading stuff, you know. When I started reading comprehension long in the 90s, I was terrible at it. I worked really hard, memorized every single word in the dictionary and every single thing. Just didn't have a lot of guidance at the time. I did okay. I did really good on my reading comprehension tests, and over time, it wasn't until after I took my tests and I had perfect scores in my math and logic sections. In the reading, I was right around about 80-ish, 85 percentile, which is okay-ish. But then I sort of kept working on it. I knew what I lacked in reading and what my weaknesses were. And I realized that being a second language, I was not absorbed in the language enough. You know, what happens when you have a language that is your native tongue, if there is a statement, say, I am happy, you know, in your mind, you're not reading that as I am happy. You instantly read the whole thing. You read all three words instantly. So that kind of changes a little bit of the perspective. Being able to read something instantly as a big chunk comes when you're reading and thinking in your native tongue. So even if English is your second language, you can develop that ability. What happens is, like, my name is John. Okay. So when you're reading this, you instantly know that that's the sentence. It's called a ghost reading. You don't have to actually read and recite it in your mind. That is the case. So same thing. As sentences start getting bigger and bigger, and that's when we start to kind of dwindle out. We don't have a way to read a whole passage like this. You know, a passage that is quite complex. We start reading, William was gone and home he had left her and was blah blah blah, and all of a sudden you're actually mentally reading and reciting those words instead of actually instantly knowing what the passage is talking about in that line. Now, even if you don't have that ability, you can still be a great reader by reading line by line and instead of reading a pattern at a time. You know, it all just really starts with practice. It took me some time, but I ended up becoming a really good test taker, a really good reading comprehension performer per se, scoring nearly 100% in each of the reading comprehensions. And it took years to develop, and I have tutored several students who were extremely weak in reading comprehension at first, and then they just kept working on it, kept applying strategies, and eventually they got better. But it all starts with the sooner you start reading, the better it is. Now, to start reading in a SAT or a competitive setting, you need about 150 words per minute. You need to not only read 150 words per minute, but you have to be able to comprehend 150 words per minute. That is part one of your strategy secret. Practice something that's called ghost reading. Ghost reading is you pick a passage from anything about 150 words, or you just write 150 words, or just find a random newspaper and time yourself. You need to read and you need to be able to comprehend. And keep reading. You read something for a minute, okay? And then you close the book. And you try to remember as much as you can from what you just read. So that practice is called ghost reading. Ghost reading is a strategy that a lot of elite analytical readers employ. You don't have too much time to read. You're probably going to only get enough time to read one passage in one pass, and maybe, just maybe, a second pass if you're a fast reader. Even if you're a slow reader, it's not a lost cause. Slow readers actually have an advantage. If you're reading slow, then use that skill to your advantage. As when you read slow, really understand it. Really understand what you're reading. So that's your target, 150 words per minute. You just take a storybook, a passage, and read and close the book. Then try to remember as much as possible. Okay. Try to write down all the details. The details you want to be able to understand is the main idea, what is the general idea, and context, and genre, maybe characters or arguments or logic. So these are the things that you want to instantly. You read something, close the book, read 150 words, close the book, and just write what you remember. So use that strategy until you keep getting better and better and better. And eventually you'll find out that you're reading 150 words per minute and comprehending it. It's not a fast speed, but that is the speed that you need to finish most of your questions on time. And you will find out that it's a decent speed. So what we're going to do is go into some of these passages, and I'll give you a little bit more strategies. Now, a lot of people say that strategy, read the question first, or read the passage first. Always, 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 always read the passage first. Never read the questions first, regardless of what you have been told. And I'll tell you why. Because these questions, they're always similar. There's only a few ways they're gonna ask you what is the main idea of the passage. Like right here, see, what best describes what happens in the passage as a whole? Attitude. Things like what closely means. Then you've got the claim, evidence, reasoning type questions. Best evidence. These aren't gonna be different most of the times. So you'll be wasting your precious minutes trying to read questions that you already know what they're going to be about. Either general idea, tone of the passage, evidence, claim, reasoning, some detail about the characters. It's a useless use of time when you go to read the questions first. And even if you do read the questions first and you happen to glance over the answers, they're only going to confuse you. What am I about to read here? So never read the questions first. Always attack the passage first. Now, when you attack the passage first, there is a strategy for it as well. You don't want to be surprised by the passage. You don't want to be like, I don't know what this passage is about, but I'm going to find out. You don't want to go into the passage with that kind of mentality. at least not for analytical reading. If you're doing recreational reading and you don't want spoilers, that's totally fine. But when you're going into a reading comprehension test, that's no longer recreational reading. Although you can enjoy it, but you don't want to be surprised by it, there are no spoilers in there. So first thing you want to do is try to look at the passages and try to guess what genre they're kind of like, you know. So then they will be in some general categories, like this is a science passage, and you can guess by, hey, I have a lot of scientific information here, germs, and I've got some scientific data, percentiles, and then you've got this other passage, and you'll find this text right here. Citation has a citation here, adapted from 1981 speech to Congress. Ronald Reagan states his reasons for a new program for economic recovery. So now that is a historical, political, socio-economic passage. So always read that. Read what the passage citation is. It will be a little footnote there, and sometimes you will get it, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll get a title. Like here, the title was microbiomes. So now in here, okay. So this one, the following is from Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, 1814. Novel's protagonist Fanny Price returns home after many years of living with her wealthy relatives at Mansfield Park. So that's your first clue as to what genre the passage belongs to. Okay, it's a novel. It's a novel like Tight Corners or some sort of family chemistry going, a person, a son or a daughter returning after living with wealthy relatives. So that's kind of like a novel, story, literature type of passage. Now pick your poison. What you are really good at, start with that first. So number one thing, get to 150 words per minute comprehension speed. Number two is be able to identify what genre a passage belongs to quickly and read passages that you know you are strong in. Like, let's say I would start with science. I really like science, and the subject seems interesting to me. And usually scientific passages are quite simple and straightforward. They have a little bit of data, so that's another strategy to attack the science passage first and get that out of the way, but you can do whatever you like, per se. So we went into what? We went into ghost reading. So ghost reading is a technique to get your reading to 150 words per minute with comprehension. And then even if you close the book, you try to remember at least 3 to 4 things from the passage, at least the main idea. So I'm going to go over some of these questions in here, and I'll show you how these strategies can be employed here. You may have heard all kinds of strategies that find out passages that have line numbers. Oh, so I should mark these line numbers here before I start reading. That is also not a good strategy. Though there are some tutors who will tell you, find out which lines these passages are going to belong to, so mark that. And when you read those lines, read them extra carefully. There's no such thing as reading something extra carefully. There's either reading or there's not reading. And the same thing with reading, you're either a good reader or you're not a good reader yet. You're either SWAT or not. Right? No, just kidding. So there is no such thing as reading carefully and not reading carefully. There's only reading. So just when you're diving down into the passage, dive right down and start reading. So let's say there was a passage. I'll just go by, I want to do some literature first. So the first and foremost strategy is skimming the passage. There are multiple strategies of skimming the passage. Some people say that you just kind of look for some keywords and first lines. And the most effective strategy is forming a skeleton of the passage in your mind. Meaning, first, you get the genre right, get the feeling, build up an anticipation. Okay, this girl, this person, Fanny Price, is returning home after many years, after living with her wealthy relatives at Mansfield Park. So build this character in your mind that she's coming home and now she's probably going to be in for some surprises. And that is probably what's going to happen in this passage. So as you start reading, when you're skimming first, before you dive down, skim each paragraph's first couple lines. So I'm going to go through William was gone, and the home he had left her in was, Fanny could not conceal it from herself, in almost every respect, the very reverse of what she could have wished. Okay, so that was the first part right here that I read from that paragraph. That gives me a general idea that some of our expectations are shattered. So I'm not going to bother reading this right now, and I'm going to go here. At the next paragraph, her disappointment, if you can follow my cursor, her disappointment in her mother was greater. There she had hoped much and found almost nothing. Every flattering scheme of being of consequence to her soon fell to ground. Okay, so in the second paragraph, first paragraph, nothing was in order. Second paragraph, she's saying her mom is nothing like what she expected. Okay, now without even going to the whole passage, I'm going to go to the next paragraph. Of her two sisters, Mrs. Price very much more resembled Lady Bertram than Mrs. Norris. Okay, so there's some characters being introduced here. And Mrs. Price, I think, is the mother of the the main character. So now she's trying to draw up some comparisons. Then I'm going to go to the last passage, first few lines. Her mother was partial, ill-judging parent, a dawdle. Okay, now she's upset with her mom for some reason. Then Fanny was very anxious to be useful and not appear above her home in any way, disqualified or disciplined by her foreign education from contributing her help to its comfort. So now that I went and quickly glanced through the first few lines of the each paragraph, I built something called a ghost skeleton in my head. I'm not going to be surprised about what's about to happen now. What I just read. She's coming back home, and she has some expectations that are shattered. She doesn't like the way her mom turned out. Then she's drawing up some comparisons about what she's like now, and I'm assuming these characters are probably somewhat related in the passage. You will probably hear it. But in the end, she's ending the passage at somewhat of a positive note that she wants to be useful. Okay, so it seems like there's going to be some sort of a happy ending. Well, let's just find out. So that was called a quick glance, the ghost reading. Now I have a skeleton in my head, and I'm going to dive down into detailed reading. Now, this has to be fast, but I'm going to read it a little slower just so you can follow. Now, I have links for these passages down below. You can download these passages if you want to follow it through, and pause this video once you have that downloaded and printed out and whatnot. But I'm going to give you a few minutes for that. Okay, so I'm going to now do the deep reading, which is the first was the skim, the second was the deep reading. William was gone, and the home he had left her in was, Fanny could not conceal it from herself, in almost every respect the very reverse of what she could have wished. It was the abode of noise, disorder, and impropriety. Nobody was in their right place. Nothing was done as it ought to be. She could not respect her parents as she had hoped. On her father, her confidence had not been sanguine, but he was more negligent of his family. His habits were worse and his manners coarser than she had been prepared for. He did not want abilities, but he had no curiosity and no information beyond his profession. He read only the newspaper and the Navy list. He talked only of the dockyard, the harbor, the spithead, the mother bank. He swore and he drank. He was dirty and gross. She had never been able to recall anything approaching to tenderness in his former treatment of herself. There had remained only a general impression of roughness and loudness, and now he scarcely ever noticed her, but to make her the object of a coarse joke. Her disappointment in her mother was greater. There she had hoped much, and found almost nothing. Every flattering scheme of being of consequence to her soon fell to ground. Mrs. Price was not unkind, but instead of gaining on her affection and confidence and becoming more and more dear, Her daughter never met with greater kindness from her than on the first day of her arrival. The instinct of nature was soon satisfied, and Mrs. Price's attachment had no other source. Her heart and her time were already quite full. She had neither leisure nor affection to bestow on Fanny. Her daughters never had been much to her. She was fond of her sons, especially of William, but Betsy was first of her girls whom she had ever much regarded. To her she was most injudiciously indulgent. Judiciously indulgent. William was her pride, Betsy her darling, and John, Richard, Sam, Tom, Charles occupied all the rest of her maternal solicitude. Alternately, her worries and her comfort. These shared her heart. Her time was given chiefly to her house and her servants. Her days were spent in a kind of slow bustle. All was busy without getting on, always behindhand and lamenting it, without altering her ways, wishing to be an economist, without contrivance or regularity, dissatisfied with her servants, without skill to make them better, and whether helping or reprimanding or indulging them, without any power of engaging their respect. Of her two sisters, Mrs. Price very much more resembled Lady Bertram than Mrs. Norris. She was a manager by necessity, without any of Mrs. Norris's inclination for it, or any of her activity. Her disposition was naturally easy and indolent, like Lady Bertram's, and a situation of similar affluence and do-nothingness would have been much more suited to her capacity than the exertions and self-denials of one which her imprudent marriage had placed her in. She might have made just as good a woman of consequence as Lady Bertram, but Mrs. Norris would have been a more respectable mother of 9 children on a small income. Much of this Fanny could not but be sensible of. She might scruple to make use of the words, but she must and did feel that her mother was partial, ill-judging parent, a dawdle slattern who neither taught nor restrained her children, whose house was the scene of mismanagement and discomfort from beginning to end, and who had no talent, no conversation, no affection towards herself, no curiosity to know her better, no desire of her friendship, and no inclination for a company that could lessen her sense of such feelings. Fanny was anxious to be useful, and not to appear above her home, or in any way disqualified or disinclined by her foreign education from contributing her help to its comforts, and therefore set about working for Sam immediately, and by working early and late, with perseverance and great dispatch, did so much that the boy was shipped off at last. With more than half of his linen ready, she had great pleasure in feeling her usefulness, but could not conceive how they would have managed without her. Okay, so we're going to try to remember as much as we can from the skeleton, though, that we had formed, that there's a girl, she's coming back home, Fanny Price, and she's disappointed with how everything is. She was living with her relatives. I can only assume that these people that she's comparing her mom to, of her two sisters, Mrs. Price very much more resembled Lady Bertram than Mrs. Norris. So it seems like she may have been living with one of these, so she knows what they're like, and then she's comparing it. So going by memory, every single thing that you read from the skeleton, try to remember. The girl comes home. She's disappointed. Her dad's making fun of her. She's not happy. She wants to have some engaging conversation with her dad, but her dad is just seemingly not interested in talking about anything else but Navy and boats. Then she moves on from that. She doesn't have a very good image of her dad at that point. Then she's talking about her mom. Say, okay, she's not paying enough attention to her. She came home, and then her attention is almost the same as the time passes. She's not paying as much attention to her. And then she says her mom doesn't have as much of a inclination to do things. She wants to be something. I think in the passage she wants to be something, but she's not applying herself. So she's disappointed in general in how things turned out in her absence. Then I think then she's just making some comparisons, and in the end, what she says is, that regardless of what happened, she wants to be helpful. She wants to do stuff. It seems like she's coming back, and she's going to be working for someone called Sam. Now, they don't really tell the name of her dad, but I can only assume that she's going to come back and work for her dad. And I don't know who William is. The character William was not introduced in here. So that's, now I'm likely not going to be able to read it one more time in detail like this. So about 5 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, you get that. And then which question should I attack first? You know, always attack the questions that have line numbers, as used in line 35. Which option gives the best evidence? Oh, claim evidence reasoning questions. These are great because they usually come in pairs of 2. I guarantee you the question before this, the more that Fanny is around her mother, the more her mother treats her with what? Then, which option gives the best evidence for the answer for the previous question, so that you get 2 for the price of 1? So again, once you develop your reading ability, form the ghost skeleton of the passage, do a deeper read, try to remember as many details as possible, then read the questions that have line numbers, because line numbers will give you one more opportunity to go to the passage. So we're going to try to do the claim evidence reasoning, because this is the 2 for the price of 1. Okay, so the more that Fanny is around her mother, the more her mother treats her with abuse. We definitely don't remember abuse from her mother, of course. I don't think so, at least. And affection, definitely not. Inattention, probably, because that's probably what was happening, that she's not paying attention. So I think the answer is C. Now, which option gives the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Now, we know that her mom's passage, because if we have a ghost skeleton in our head, we know that her mom is right here. Her mom's disappointment was greater, blah, 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 blah. And I bet you it's probably in here somewhere. So 19 to 21, not possible. 19 to 21 is when she's talking about her dad. Her mom is basically right around here. Okay, so it would be right here. Mrs. Price was not unkind, but instead of gaining on her affection and confidence and becoming more and more dear, her daughter never met with greater kindness from her than on the first day of her arrival. What that means is that she kind of just thought of her the same as she did when she first came. So usually what happens is when you have a guest that comes home, like you come home after a long time, and usually the people pay more attention in a good setting. I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but in this case, for her, nothing changed. So instead of gaining on her affection and confidence and becoming more dear, her daughter never met with a greater kindness from her than on the very first day. So those are signs of inattention. So that would be your answer, B here and there. So now we're going to jump to the next question that has a line number, which would be, which option gives the best, there you go, best claim evidence passage. So we're going to get 2 for the price of 1. When Fanny returns to live with her parents, she's eager to be, let's see what? Not a martyr. Always think of eliminating a choice. Your first thought should be not going for the right answer, but why something is incorrect. Not a martyr, not an economic innovator, not a mentor, so we're left with helpful contributor. So it's probably going to be in the last passage right here, the D, where he says something about comforts. So about here, Fanny was anxious to be useful. That's where the answer is, because that's where the line number points to. Now we go to the next question. The third paragraph, line 59 to 73, suggests that Mrs. Norris, okay, that's a character, one of her sisters. So 59 to 73, we're going to go right here, because see, it makes it easier for you to reskim the passage, so you're getting more details for the other questions that you have not yet done. That is a secret strategy that is usually given to elite students before tests. So 59 to 70 says that Mrs. Norris is probably more capable than Price, because she's saying right here, she resembled more Lady Bertram than Mrs. Norris. She was a manager by necessity without any of Mrs. Norris's inclination for it. So that tells that Mrs. Norris is more capable than Mrs. Price. So similar in personality, now more lethargic than Mrs. Price. Nope, can't be more lazy because she says right here, without any of Mrs. Norris's inclination for it or her activity, her disposition was naturally easy and indolent, like Lady Bertram's. Meaning Lady Bertram is kind of lazy and Mrs. Norris is not. So that would be number A. Nothing about respect, nothing about similar to personalities there. Here, another line 46. The word occupied means. So go to line 46, take an opportunity. Betsy, her darling, and John, Richard, Sam, Tom, and Charles occupied all the rest of her maternal solicitude, meaning her attention, basically. So mind is sort of busy with those kids than her. So I would say be engaged, so that the mind is engaged all the rest of her maternal solicitude. Nothing about resided. Dual. Those are too weird word to be. It says most closely resemble to. So what else says about line numbers? Line 35. Using line 35, we go to line 35. The instinct of nature was soon satisfied. So the instinct of nature would be a maternal, motherly kind of feeling, not a desire for survival, thirst for acceptance, sense of justice. Okay, easy peasy, maternal feeling. Okay, so now we have quickly encountered all the questions that have line numbers and answered them. Now we can answer some of the ones that require us a whole understanding. What best describes the passage as a whole? Now this is a central idea, a passage as a whole, meaning you're looking for a little bit of every passage and combining them together and not just pointing out a particular detail. So character discusses her troubled thoughts to close family and friends. No, I don't think these are troubled thoughts with closed family and friends. There's really no way to tell that she is discussing her troubled thoughts. I think she is just kind of, she had expectations and then she was disappointed. Okay, they're not signs of troubled thoughts. They're too dark. Choice A is too dark. Choice B, a character analyzes observations relative to her experiences and expectations. There you go, expectation. She came in with an expectation that were not met. I bet you that's the right choice. A character reflects on how she could be better contributor to her immediate family. Now C could also be the case, but C is only mentioned at the end and not the passage as a whole. So we got to pick the things that are tying all the passages together. So it would not be this because that's the detail and not really a passage as a whole. Character considered economic station and strongly her. Okay, obviously not. Nothing about her being well off or being better off in a wealthy way. But all the passages, if you go back to your mental skeleton that you have formed, all the passages are sort of showing how she's disappointed. She had expectations. She came and then they were not met. But so that would be the whole thing. Fanny's overall attitude towards her parents is best described as affection, obviously not. Jealousy, no, she's not jealous of anything. Unwarranted disrespect, okay. That could be the case because she's kind of mean. When I was reading that, it felt like that she is being mean to her parents in a way in her thoughts. Now, choice D says warranted disappointment. Now, she is disappointed in how things are in general. But the word, see, this is where it gets kind of tricky. It says warranted. Why did they add the word warranted? It means that she deserves, like the parents deserve that kind of disappointment. But this is not, we're not trying to judge here. That's another important thing when you go into a passage. You're not the judge. You're not being asked to judge something. So there's no information that says that her parents deserved the treatment that she's saying. So warranted would meaning that they deserve the thoughts that she's having towards them, but there's really no detail about what she deserves or not deserves, so you can't really be the judge. But what we can do is unwarranted disrespect, meaning there is no evidence that she didn't really quote many things that would say that this is warranted or unwarranted. This is a tricky one. Although C and D could both be correct, but best described as would be disrespect. So that would be a choice from my end. Some people may pick the disappointment. But I think the word warranted and unwarranted is what makes the cut right there. First paragraph characterizes Fanny's father's intellectual interest as relevant and interesting. Father, well, she's talking about a father right here. He talked about only about the dockyard, the harbor, Spithead, and Mother Bank. He swore and he drank. He was dirty and gross. She had never been able to recall anything approaching to tenderness. Okay, so definitely not relevant, interesting. Coarse, yes. Joking, maybe. Overly pragmatic, maybe. Arrogantly erudite. Erudite means someone who's super smart and arrogant. I don't think that's her dad. Overly pragmatic meaning somebody who's kind of like an overly practical, doesn't want to engage in anything that is non-practical. So it could be between B and C. So my guess would be, first guess would be coarse and joking, but I don't think that, I know he's coarse, but joking he's not, even though it says right here, but to make her, he scarcely ever noticed her, but to make her the object of a coarse joke, meaning she's not actually liking that he's making fun of her. So I think this is a trick. See, sometimes you just have to think about that. Now, she's not really thinking that he's funny. I think she's more upset. So overly pragmatic is the only choice left, meaning he's too practical, meaning he doesn't want to talk about anything that is other than what he knows. He just wants to stick to his comfort zone. He did not want ability. He had no curiosity, no information beyond his profession. He read only the newspaper and the Navy list. So those are the kind of characteristics of someone who is overly pragmatic. So this is a high EQ question right here. So coarse and joking is a trick, I think, because it says the words coarse and a joke are being used, but I don't think she thinks those are her father's intellectual interests, because the intellectual interests are right here about just staying in its comfort zone. Okay. Yeah, we answered all the questions. So yeah, maybe another time we can dig into another passage, but let me quickly show you a ghost skimming of this one. Ronald Reagan. So now we're going to try to see if we can get a ghost image of this one. Obviously, it's political. And he's making an ad, he's speaking joint session of the Congress. Okay, so he's making some sort of a proposal. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, distinguished members of the Congress, honors guests, and fellow citizens, only a month ago I was your guest in your historic building. I pledged you my cooperation in doing what is right for this nation. Okay, next paragraph. All of us are aware of the punishing inflation. Okay, ping, one plea. Next one, paragraph. Almost 8 million Americans are out of work. Ping, second. Inflation, out of work. One worker in Midwest City put it to me this way. I'm bringing home more dollars than I ever believed I could possibly earn. 3, an example. Can we, who the man, the ship of state deny it is somewhat out of control? National debt is approaching trillion. Ping. Okay, so we've got 4 pings that are happening. People Americans out of job. We've got inflation, and then we've got debt that is trillion. So kind of getting an idea what this passage is about. Adding to our troubles is the massive regulations imposed on the shopkeeper as a form of government regulations. Then now I have painted a pretty grim picture, but I think I've painted it accurately. It is within our power to change this picture. Okay, so he gives all of what is wrong, these 5 things, and then he has a proposal to change those things. And what do you know? This then is our proposal, America's New Beginning, a program for economic recovery. I'm here tonight to ask you to join me in making it our plan. So it seems like he's trying to convince, the joint session of the Congress. So all we did, now all of that skimming can be done very quickly if you're really good. So I haven't even read the whole passage, and I kind of have a ghost shell in my mind. And then before I even look at the question, I will go do the same thing. I'll dive into the passage, read the whole thing, then attack the questions that have line numbers. Always remember that. Start with the questions that have line numbers. That's an extra opportunity to go in and read the passage at that point one more time, reinforcing your mental picture. So same thing, used in line 12, the word punishing in line 12 is blah right here. All of us are aware of the punishing inflation, which has, for the first time, punishing with being like severe, probably be that, severe inflation. So then line number. So that you get the idea of how to approach a passage, but it's all going to start by learning to get better and better and better at reading faster and comprehending better. So ghost reading, go back to our strategies, 150 words per minute, then ghost skeleton, and then use the questions that have the line numbers first. And always, always passage first, then the questions. So skeleton of the passage, make a mental picture, don't be surprised. Read all the footnotes, read the first 2 or 3 lines of a paragraph each very quickly, then form a mental picture. Then read the passage, then go to the questions that have line numbers. I guarantee you, if you use these strategies, your score will jump up immediately, significantly, and your questions will be correct a lot. Well, all right. Thanks for watching.